the 2025 hurricane season has just begun. It goes from June to November. And why am I talking about it? Well, I have an interest in natural disaster. I have an interest in emergencies and crisis. I'm not saying that this is only a male thing, but I think when you're a man, you want to be useful when something important is happening. And not only is that just through resources, but it's also through knowledge, and it's also through strategy and some thinking ahead of time. So where do axes come into play? Well, when it comes to hurricanes, a lot of the times people will say, have an axe in your attic. Now, not everybody has an attic, but that's not the only circumstances where an axe is useful. You also have cleanup after the whole ordeal. I mean, sometimes there's $100 billion worth of damage. You can imagine what that's like. If you have all that damage, there's a lot of stuff to clean up. And axes are not just for trees. Axes are also good for breaking down other things. I mean, most of our homes are built with lumber. And what is lumber made of? Well, I think it's made of the stuff that grows out of the ground. They call it a tree. So, I don't know why I said that, like such a little... Anyway. The reason why we have an axe in the attic, if you have an attic, is because when flood waters rise, and they can rise very quickly, apparently, you might get stuck if you flee to the attic. So what happens is, instead of drowning in your attic, you break through it with an axe. Now, if you try to do that with your fists, I don't know if that's going to go too well. Even a hammer might work. You got to be really resourceful, really know what you're doing, and you have to understand wood a little bit. And that's not just for a hammer. Now, you have to know about wood if you're using an axe, because what will you be doing? You might be cutting through wood. Now, you don't want to cut through rafters. You don't want to cut through the thickest. You want to cut through the least amount. So you're looking for the path of least resistance. So you're just going to go straight into whatever is open, right? Now, I don't know the technical terms here, but as fast as you can get to those shingles, that's what you want to do. I thought it would be a good idea to take a look at some axes, maybe what people might have. Here's a tiny little boy's axe. This is a 24-inch handle. Now, we're just talking about maybe breaking through structures, but if you want to learn about actually using an axe, maybe in the cleanup, check out Ben Scott, check out Skill Colt. I have some videos, but they're not exactly to the point as much as Skill Colt and Ben Scott. Axes of Keevil is good. If Brian Two Bears, let's see who else has some really good videos about using axes for cutting. I'll put some more in the description because I think this is a good place. This topic doesn't get brought up a lot. Axes are not just for leisure, obviously. A lot of people live off their axe. You know, they'll heat their home. That's another thing. You might have to use, awful as it sounds, you might go back to the Stone Ages, you might go back to the Bronze Age, and this is a huge upgrade to the Bronze Age. So you might have to heat with wood. Now, hurricanes aren't exactly a cold weather thing, but hey, if you have to boil water, this right here, very important. So have your ferrocerium rod, just in case you can't get a lighter, have that extra ferrocerium rod, have that axe. So let's talk about this axe. This is about a 24-inch handle. It's not for splitting, it's for cutting, as you can see. This is a Hudson Bay pattern, which is actually one of the worst patterns. Because of the eye and pole being this short, the eye is where the wood goes in, and then it's locked in. It's locked in with a wedge. So the wedge in that middle, you see it's popping out. It spreads the tongue of the handle. The tongue is what goes in, and then the tongue is cut with a saw so the wedge can slide in there, and it spreads the wood out and locks everything together. And the reason why this short eye is bad, well, they call it a short pole, but it's the same thing. The pole is usually the same as the eye right here. The reason why it's bad is because the design creates a lot of force that wiggles it loose and eventually just pops out. So be very careful if you have something like this. It might fall apart. Another aspect of having a short handle is you're probably going to want to choke up. If you're going through an attic, be very careful. Slow, careful movement. Do not, never use your full speed that you can put the axe into. I mean, hey, if it comes down to it, and you are about to drown, maybe you have to go a little quicker than you should. But I would say that being careful is important in this situation. And don't go beyond 90% as hard as you can swing. I mean, it's up to you. It's a judgment call, obviously. But just thinking about it quickly, it's not going to help when you're bleeding to death in this situation and you're the only person that could do it. Another aspect of using axes is you must practice. So if you have an axe, you better go swing it, and cross-cutting is not splitting. So learn the difference. Let's see. This is how a tree grows, straight up and straight down. When you split it, you're splitting these fibers in between here. You're splitting these fibers in between. When you're cutting it, you're cutting across. And when you cut, you don't just cut straight. If you were to cut straight into this, it would be very tough. So what you do is you go like this. You go like that, and you go like that, and you basically make a V. You make a notch at about a 45-degree angle on both sides, which actually becomes 90 if you add it up. So this is really dumb what I'm doing, but it's kind of fun. So yeah, learn how to make a notch. Obviously, if you're cutting through like particle board or plywood, it's not the same thing. So you are just going straight. And when you are cutting through this plywood, what you want to do is you want to make as small, well, it doesn't really matter about, it matters a little. If time is of the essence, what you're doing is you're cutting. So say this is a grid, and I'm facing the particle board or plywood or whatever. You make a grid, you make a rectangle just so people can fit through. So bop bop bop, bop bop bop, and then however you want to get the top or bottom, you might be able to use the pole. When it comes to specific tools that are made for this is called a pickhead axe. This is a fire axe, and this was made for that. So this is to kind of make a hole, a hole so your axe bit can penetrate, and that's when you make that rectangle or square, whatever you want to call it, whatever is most efficient to get people through. Now, that's a pretty large axe. Those pickhead axes, these fire axes, this is a massive one. So this is a 36-inch handle. You're really not going to want to put your hands all the way out here unless you really know what you're doing. All right, if you watch The Shining, I believe Jack, he says, here's Johnny. That's the scene. He says, here's Johnny. He breaks through with a fire axe, I believe. And that's a big axe, and he's using all of it. And you can see at the end of the scene, he's not being very safe. But he's lost his mind, so it's a little different. I want you to be safe, because most important when you're in a survival situation is to not make it worse. If you were to hit your foot, if you were to hit your shin, if you were to hit the upper part of your leg, you could bleed out and die. I mean, you can bleed out and die if you hit lower than that, but there are some major things going on, arteries, veins, I don't know the difference. I'm not a medical guy. But this is huge. This is a 6-pounder, and you really want to know what you're doing, and you really want to have some size if you're using this. I'm not saying small people can't use this. Competent axemen absolutely can use this. But if this is your 5th time swinging an axe and you weigh 150 pounds, hopefully you have something smaller than this, because this is about as big as they get when it comes to a fire axe. Probably 5-6 pound head. Dangerous. The brand is not going to matter if you're trying to get through, okay? You don't need to buy a Swedish axe to survive. Of course, steel matters when you're using it for permanently. If you're using it for long term, if you're using something for 3 days and the steel is good enough and you have a file, you'll be fine, guys. So I thought another good thing to talk about was what axe you'll have. You might not have a fire axe, so whatever axe you have is the best axe to use, obviously. You might have something like this that's kind of a really poorly restored axe. It's, as you can see, you might not be able to see, there's rust on it. This was in a flood. I left this in a little bit of a flood. Some pumps stopped working. It's not really a flood, but basically if you know about basements in certain areas, it's below the water. I mean, well, the water always wants to come in because groundwater, whatever they call that. So this got a little bit of flood action. Let's take a look at it. Let's see if it's still secure. It looks secure enough, but look at that. I think that was an oak wedge and it just completely became black. Let's see, is it loose? It's not loose, or at least it doesn't feel loose. So let's go over the things you want to look at before you use this axe in an emergency. Is it keen enough to cut? This is, while it's fat, it does have sort of a thin edge. So yes, you could cut with it. Now I'm feeling the edge and it grabs my fingers. Now, if you don't know about sharp things, don't just do this. Maybe do it with your fingernail first and see if it kind of shaves it a little bit. Be very careful. In a hurricane, and if you really don't want cuts in a hurricane because it's probably a very damp, hot environment, and just like when you're in a jungle, that's when cuts become septic, or you could get bacteria in them, and that is not something you want when maybe you won't be rescued for days, weeks. Some people don't get rescued for a month or more. I think well, at least some places don't get power for that long. And when you don't have power, it's harder to get places. It's harder for hospitals to operate. So who knows? Just being as prepared as you can, and it mentally is a good idea. So we don't want cuts. Axes are a little dangerous. So there's nothing wrong with choking up on the handle, making sure you're only swinging as hard as you have to. There's nothing wrong with that. Let's take a look at other axes. This is something I think people could have. This is an axe from the 80s, not a restored axe. As you can see, it's a Permabond plum jersey pattern. They're not really jersey patterns, but I think that's what they call them. And this is bent, I believe, yeah. Look how bent that is. Look how bent that is. Oh, man. You can still use it, but it's going to be a little crazy. Not going to be comfortable to use, but we don't need comfort. We need it to work. It's not going to be very... so you might not have a sharp axe. When you can see reflection when it's pointing straight at you, that means there's no edge. I can hit it, and it's not going to cut me. So this is more of a blunt object. It's almost like a sharp hammer. I know that sounds weird, but it's just a hammer with a V because there's no edge. But it still has a little bit of penetrating properties, right? So it is a little bit of a wedge. It does get pretty thin. Gets thin enough. So if you have something like this, you won't be doing any cutting on real timber. But you could get through a roof, for instance. You might be able to get through a wall. Drywall, come on guys, we can get through drywall. How many guys do you know that haven't punched through drywall? You know you can get through drywall. If you were ever in demolition, you know your abilities to break stuff. So that might actually be a good idea. Get in demolition. You don't need to be in construction. Do a little demolition, understand how our structures work a little bit, And that actually could help you in a survival situation. Say you're stuck in a house and there's zombies coming in. No, okay. This is serious, okay? This is so serious, man. No, I do try to give the reverence that it deserves when we talk about hurricanes, because they're awful. They're maybe some of the worst. I mean, there's tornadoes. You have Tornado Alley, and you have Dixie Alley, I think it's called, is the other less talked about area where it's common for tornadoes to happen. But tornadoes at most last a couple hours, and that's a terrible. If they last a couple hours, something terrible has happened. I think there's the tri-state tornado, maybe in the 20s or 30s. It went like 200, 300 miles. And it might have not been the same tornado, but it might have kind of stopped and picked up again. And it just a long line of devastation. When it comes to a hurricane, it's not going to be 300 mile an hour winds. But you could have a tornado from that happens. Tornadoes come from hurricanes sometimes. The same storm system can, cause tornadoes. But tornadoes are sort of like you gotta wait it out. It's not just this short-term thing. It's not 15 minutes of awful destruction. It's days sometimes. A hurricane sometimes can just stop. I forget the hurricanes, but it's happened before, kind of in recent history. And sadly, we are now forecasters are guessing that this could be a similar hurricane season to other very bad hurricane seasons. So it's thought to be above average. There could be, I think, 17 storms, maybe a little less than 10 named, and 4 to 5 major hurricanes. So what is a major hurricane? Category 3 and up, 3, 4, 5. I personally hope I never have to experience a real hurricane. It's always a worry. If you live on the coast, you're worried about it. Now, the Northeast doesn't get hit as much, but it's going to happen eventually. A hurricane will hit probably all of the Northeast. Maybe not in our time, hopefully not in my time. I mean, I hope nobody ever gets affected, but it's just the nature of things. Florida is hit so often that, have an axe. If you live in Florida, man, learn how to use an axe if you're a man. And obviously, I've talked about it before, but women can also use an axe. It isn't a sexist tool. Actually, there's a lot of lumberjills that are way better at using axes than me. And lumberjill, to me, I'm just talking about timber sports, but plenty of them, plenty of ladies out there can really swing an axe. And let's get rid of that thought that this is about power. This is about strategy. This is about technique. And this is about how much speed you can get on this over and over and over. So it's a stamina thing as well. The speed is what power is, essentially. It's the same weight, the same length, and you're just trying to make it go as fast as you can with endurance in mind. So usually when I swing an axe, I'm probably swinging at about 50 to 70% power. I hate saying the word power because really it's putting speed on this. But let's get back. I kind of got sidetracked here. Let's get back to looking at this axe. So that's a break. So when you slide your hand back up, you could get a splinter. And we don't want to, obviously if it's a dangerous situation, you don't want to have to deal with anything like that. So if you have an axe and it's screwed up but you can't replace the handle, let's say, get rid of this sharp stuff, get a file, get some sandpaper, get rid of that sharp stuff, and that'll help you a lot. Because once, like I said, you don't want damage on your body. Even little cuts can fester. It seems like a little pansy thing to say, but a little cut in an emergency situation can become a big problem. So another problem with this axe is it just wasn't hung well. So what I would say, if you were actually using something like this, and when I say it's not hung well, it means that there's curl. So you can see the wood is kind of being cut by the bottom of the eye. The eye is the hole in the axe. And that means that it's sharp on the bottom, and this can be a breaking point. It's also too thick. So the handle almost comes out further than the metal. You can't really see it, but the handle is almost thicker than the metal here. So that means that the handle can get abraded and it can break easier and get messed up easier if you use it, and the wood isn't just interacting with the metal anymore, but the wood is interacting with the wood. Because what happens is when the metal is thicker here than the wood, it kind of protects it. It kind of has like an overhang, so the wood is separated enough where it doesn't touch the timber is separated enough where it doesn't touch the wooden handle. Let's see, what else can we learn about this? Oh, this is what I wanted to say. So when you find possible weaknesses, you think this handle might come loose or it could break, what I want you to think about when you're using this axe is I'm throwing it, right? You're basically just throwing or whipping the axe head. So you're whipping, right? And when you contact whatever you're contacting, when you hit that wood, I don't want you trying to push through that wood. All of the speed on that axe head is done when you whip it, right? And when you finally get down to the wood, I want you to loosen up that grip and don't give that death grip. First of all, the death grip is bad for you. Now, long term, if you actually use axes, it's bad for you. But it will make you more tired. It'll make your grip more tired. If your swell is not good, which this isn't, and most axes won't have a good swell, it'll make it harder for you to use the axe long term in that emergency. I forget what I was kind of going with that, but yeah, we don't put a death grip. And when you're at the end of a long lever, you're doing nothing when you're pushing down at that long lever. All of the weight is up here, right? All the weight is up here. You're back here, and all you're doing is making sure it's going to where you want it to go. You are not pushing through the timber once you hit it. So loosen up that grip, and the reason why that's so important when you have a crappy handle that could break is it saves the handle. It puts a lot less stress on the handle. I mean, think about it. Think about it. I'm at the when it comes to leverage, all you're basically going to be doing is almost removing that metal, that hard metal from the wood. You're not going to be cutting through deeper. You're not going to be getting more work done by pushing, right? You're going to be testing that connection where that head and that handle meet. And that's all you're going to be doing. It's very inefficient. And in a survival situation, in an emergency, you don't want to be testing the only tool you have. Because guess what? You don't have an hour to redo this. Now, if you can, get it, maintain your axe before that important situation. So now that hurricane season is upon us, look at your tools, think about these things. If you, let's say you have only a double bit, right? You want to really have it in your head how dangerous this is. Axes are already dangerous enough, but now there's two edges. And whoever's behind you, if you have one of those swings where it goes like this, which I don't believe in that, I believe in this. I believe in straight up, straight down. Right? Straight up, straight down. Keeps everyone safe behind you, or safer. But now you have a more dangerous tool, right? So if you stick it into something and you leave it there, that is a bad idea. After you get done with that if you've cut through, let's say you have this in the attic, you've cut through that roof or a wall, whatever you're doing, you throw it to where someone to where you might be later. This is a dangerous thing to be around. You could cut something. You could, and definitely don't just stick it into something. The best way to keep axes are kind of like in corners where the edges are kind of on the wall. Now you have two edges though. So it's up to your discretion to figure out the safest way to kind of place this somewhere. Maybe you carry it with you. Maybe you take it with you. And the best way to carry an axe is up top near the dangerous heavy metal weight that's also basically a big knife, a big wedgy knife. So that's the double bit. Most people don't have double bits, but if both edges are sharp, you really got to pay attention. You really got to be conscious of what you have in your hands or what you're removing from your hands and you're putting somewhere else. Now here's a boy's axe, a little boy's axe. I showed another boy's axe, but this you can really tell. It's too thick right here. And so it gets a lot thinner up top. There's a hump. Then it gets a lot thinner as you get to there. So this could break easily. And it's just not shaped very well. If I were to say you should have an axe in the attic, maybe it should be a boy's axe. Boy's axes are about 2¼ to 2.5 pounds. I think people say 2.75 pounds can be a boy's axe. I'm not sure. I love 2.75 to 3.25 pounds for a work axe, for an axe that I can just swing all day but has a nice extra bit of weight. But a boy's axe you can really swing a lot, and it's probably a little safer. It's easy to control this much weight. Now there is one aspect of the boy's axe though that could be more dangerous. To get the same amount of work done, you have to swing this pretty hard sometimes, pretty fast. Skill Cult talks about you really got to whip it. You really got to whip that axe because it is lighter. And you got to get the head speed on this thing to do some work. Now, if it's not sharp, you really might be in trouble. So sharpen your axe. Make sure it's maintained. If it has a little rust on it right here, that's not the end of the world, trust me. Okay, the problem with rust is when it gets to your edge and it degrades the apex of your edge that makes it actually sharp. I wasn't looking at the camera. I was just staring at my ugly face. My beautiful emergency obsessed face. And that takes a long time. When it comes to rust takes a long time to ruin your edge. Even when it's a little rusty, you could still feel, oh, that's a little sharp. I could still cut with that a little bit. Now, when it comes to actually cross-cutting timber, you want that apex, you want the apex, and you want the cheeks to be set to where it will actually penetrate and not deflect, because deflections are how you can get hurt if you don't know what you're doing. But that's all part of strategy. That's the strategy of maintaining your axe and knowing about edge angles and all that kind of junk. That's too much for just one video, though. So there it is. You know, maybe you just have a cutoff axe. I don't know what to tell you if you just have an axe head. I mean, you could use it like this. Get your axes hung, because that's not going to save you probably, you know. Maybe you could. I mean, hey, nothing. Something's better than nothing. A light machete would be better than nothing, right? But if I were to choose one tool for America, for the United States of America, when it comes to survival and emergency and rebuild and all that kind of junk, axes have a pole. So this is also a hammer. Sure, vintage axe guys, we don't want to use our poles on metal, but in a survival situation, an emergency, we're using this all day long. I mean, especially guys that have multiple axes. So, you know what they say, one is none, two is one or something. I don't know who says that. Survival guys that try to scare you all the time say stuff like that. I'm not trying to scare you. If you're already into axes, this is probably more for you than someone that has no care at all for axes. But if you don't have any care for axes, and maybe this did kind of tweak something in your head, hey, ask as many questions as you want. There's plenty of guys that love this stuff and are passionate and would love to help or give you advice, all that kind of stuff. Because for me, as you can see, there's a lot of lumber behind me. That all started because I loved axes. I wanted to restore that, vintage axes. I wanted to restore them. And I wasn't too happy with the handle market back then. Now you can get handles, but they're also pretty expensive. So I started riving, which is just splitting long lumber with in a controlled way. So you can kind of It's not milling, but it's as close to milling as you can get with like 15 bucks. You can do it very cheap. All you need is a hatchet, and you can make wooden wedges to split the wood apart in a controlled fashion. And the reason why I started doing it is because what I said, it was just not easy to get good handles, and it started a whole thing. I had to find vintage handles that were actually shaped well to copy. I mean, I was doing terrible stuff. I wonder if I have any. Here we go. Here's the difference between a guy who has no template. Look at that. I mean, it's like literally a rectangle. Now, I don't actually mind flats on this face, but this is too much. This is not very rounded. And look at the shape. Just not very good. Not a great swell. Although there's a little sweep to it. It could be worse. Hey, it could be worse. It actually feels kind of nice. Let me grab a good... Oh. Ooh. Man, this is sharp. So here's this decent swell and a decent handle. This is a nice handle. Now it's curved, so the other one's more straight. But you can see the difference, right? You can see the difference between craftsmanship, and this was just coming out of the days of craftsmanship, so this is a little late. Maybe this is 50s or 60s, and what I mean by that is once the chainsaw became popular and everybody figured they could do a lot less work and get a lot more done, the handles that were great and the great axe heads kind of faded slowly, but eventually when it got to the 70s, 80s, axes were quite shit. Actually, it's funny, if you watch The Shining, you'll see that the fire axe, it's not the best. It's not the best axe in the world. You know, it's like kind of, I forget who made it. Maybe Mann made it, M-A-N-N. Anyway, I digress, I divest. I died because of my chest. So, thanks for watching, guys. I hope that does something for you. Do you have any comments or questions? Anything I missed? I definitely missed a lot of stuff. I just started thinking about this like 10 minutes ago before I started the video, and I was like, you know what? I want to go over the axes that you might have. I want to go over some of the problems you might come to if you use an axe that isn't perfect. I want to talk about the logistics. So yeah, what did I miss, guys? Thanks for watching.